Gamlangyate Garen Yatkrupatamam Vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining. Last week we completed the 11th chapter of the 5th canto, and today we'll start with chapter 12, which is a continuation of the conversation between Maharaj Rahugan and Jat Bharat. So this is also a small chapter with only 16 verses. However, some of these verses have very, very long purports by both Srila Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Essentially, the chapter speaks about what we consider as foundational elements of Bhakti, which we are very familiar with, but it introduces it in a more rigorous manner, with more formality and rigor, which is why there are extensive purports to it. So without further ado, let's start with the first verse, 512. Raugan vacha namo namah karanya vigraya swarupatuche krita vigraya namo vaduta dvijabandhulinga nigu nityanubhavaya tubhyam. Saran Prabhu, you can read the translation.
King Rahugana said, "O most exalted personality, you are not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By influence of your true self, all kinds of contradiction in the Shastras has been removed. In the dress of a friend of a Brahmana, you are hiding your transcendental blissful position. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you."
So the chapter opens up with the king once again expressing gratitude and demonstrating the continued mood of inquiry. So if you recollect, the previous chapter was a bit of back and forth. Rahugana chastised Jat Bharat, thinking he was a palanquin courier. Jat Bharat, in return, spoke from a spiritual platform. Rahugana apologized, asked him questions, and Jat Bharat responded. Rahugana is not fully convinced about the answers, but in the mood of a surrendered devotee, he is continuing to ask more. And so inquiry is the basis of relationship. One does not have necessarily to get fully convinced. In fact, Prabhupada said one should ask and continue to ask until you're convinced, but the inquiry should be in a mode of humble surrender, not in the challenging mode. So we see the king demonstrate that mode. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that he gives the essence of the 12th chapter, which like I said, is foundational. So the essence of this chapter is that the material world is false. Krishna, his abode, his devotees, and the process, bhakti, they are true. Right? So this is essentially the summation of the chapter. That what we see around us in the material world, that is false. And the only thing that is true is Bhagavan, Bhakti, and Bhakta. And this is basically proven through successive process of inquiry, and inquiry is mostly implicit here. There's not much explicit inquiry, but developing the theme. So we also see the mood of the king over here, that he addresses Jat Bharat as Karan Vigraya. So Karan, as you know, refers to Krishna, Sarva Karan, Karan, cause of everything else. And Karan Vigraha means that the personification of the Lord. So Rahugana is glorifying Jat Bharat as having an eternal form for protecting the world. And so he also addresses him as Namaha Avaduta. And at this point, he is not aware of the lineage of Jat Bharat, that he in the previous life, he was Bharat, and he received a body from Avaduta, which was the original Avadut, Rishabdev. That will be revealed later on. Prabhupada notes that it is also serendipitous, that it says that Raghugana, he addresses Jat Bharat as Karan Vigraha, because of this reason that Krishna is Sarva Karan Karanam, Rishabdev was the incarnation of Krishna, and Bharat Maharaj, who received a body from the Sarva Karan Karanam, that's why he is known as Karan Vigraha. So when Jat Bharat was showing as Bharat, when he was showing compassion to the deer, he was considering himself as the savior of the deer. And that was his downfall. So he was in the mode of goodness, but he was infested with the conception of being the doer, that I'm doing good, I'm saving the deer. Now, as Jat Bharat, he was very cautious. So he did not want to do any good. Not because he was bad, but because he was very cautious of the addiction to doing good. He was very cautious to the false prestige that one might get addicted to because of doing good. That's why he did not respond to his father's gestures. His father was his well-wisher, unlike the others around him, his brothers and the people. But Jat Bharat did not even respond to his father, because that would be reciprocating good with good. Now he reciprocated good with indifference. He did not reciprocate with bad, but this was the reason, that he was cautious against doing good. However, we see that now he is doing good, that he is doing the ultimate good, that he's instructing Maharaj Raghugana on the principles of spirituality. So what's the difference? The difference is that the good that Jat Bharat is doing to the king is on a transcendental platform. When he was protecting the deer, it was on a material platform. So material goodness has this quality of being contaminated, subject to contamination, because in the material world, the modes are never pure. Even though we say mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance, they're to identify them in terms of their qualities. But the modes are always mixed. The mode of goodness is always mixed with passion and ignorance. So how was the mode of goodness of Bharat Maharaj mixed with passion and ignorance? That he became passionate about his position as being the protector of the deer. But mode of pure goodness is completely uncontaminated. So when he is instructing the king, it is not from Satagun, it is from Shuddha Sattva. And then we see also that out of an overabundance of caution, right after Jat Bharat instructs Maharaj Raghugana, he goes into the forest and disappears. So he's careful not to linger in order to take any glorification or be attached to the good that he is doing. He simply disappears. And this caution that that Jat Bharat is displaying is partially out of his own personal experience that he has learned, but it's also the truth that Maya Devi, she does not take neophyte devotees seriously, because they are struggling as such with their senses, with their prarabdha karma. But when they become advanced, when they become more serious devotees, she also becomes more serious. So she understood that Bharat Maharaj had a weakness for kindness. She understood that as being a king for many, many millions of years, he had this mentality of being the protector. So she exploited that in the form of a helpless deer. This is why when devotees become more advanced, they become more cautious. They actually become more reclusive, so that there are lesser situations in which Maya Devi can attack them. And there are, of course, who are advanced and they mingle with the general masses, but they take this enormous risk of preaching as a service to Krishna and the Guru, and Krishna reciprocates by protecting them. But nevertheless, it is a risk. We see so many cases, maybe not Vaishnavas, but even the so-called godmen who ended up going to prison or doing abominable activities. They started off, I can't say all of them, but a lot of them started off as very sincere, strictly following transcendentalists. Maybe their philosophies were messed up. Maybe they had some different conception of spirituality, but they were very, very serious about it. Whether you look at Bhagwan Rajneesh or Mahesh Yogi, so many of them, they started off, if you look at the biography, they started off with a lot of sincerity, which is what attracted a lot of people to them. But because they were not able to protect themselves, they fell victim of their own desires and then the dangers of commingling. So we see in this verse that the king confesses that he has not fully understood all that has been spoken by Jat Bharat. So in response to that, Jat Bharat will explain further. But the point to be noted here also is that having a conversation with an exalted devotee, even if one does not understand everything that he says, just listening to the person will make advancements. That is the potency of Vaishnava Sangha. That so many of the earlier devotees, even the later devotees of Prabhupada, they did not understand what he spoke, either because it was his accent or because the subject matter that he was speaking on was foreign to them. And Prabhupada would pretty much speak in the same way, whether he was speaking in Vrindavan to Brajvasis, whether he was speaking in Pandal programs in India, whether he was speaking to hippies on 26 seconds, spoke the same way there. So they may not have understood everything that he said, but just that association, just that act of hearing sincerely what an advanced devotee says, that is sufficient. And it is said that by hearing one gets jnana, and then one acts upon that jnana, one gets vijnana. Right? Jnana is knowledge and vijnana is experience. But the association of advanced devotees, the service to such devotees, one gets jnana and vijnana at the same time, and without having to make an extra effort to understand or realize. That's the potency of advanced devotees, right? So when we deal with other people, then, and I spoke about this also in the third canto, that there is what is known as the logos. So logos is when you appeal to somebody else based on logic, on reasoning, and you try to convince the person. There is ethos, in which you appeal to because of your authority, right? You say, I am the authority on this. People accept your authority, and based on that respect that they have for your position or your persona, then they trust you. And pathos is when there is an emotional connection, like there is empathy, sympathy between the speaker and the audience. So higher than logos is ethos, because by logic you might defeat a person, but you may not convince the person. Right? With ethos, the person is actually more open to what you say. But higher than ethos is pathos, because once the person trusts you, then the person will simply be inspired to follow you. Right? So there was an anecdotal example by Gauranga Darshan Prabhu, that in Chopati he had this new devotee program, and there was a doctor who would come. He was an intelligent person, but he was very, very argumentative. Like he would question everything. How do you do this? How do you know this? Especially very, very argumentative about the fall of the jiva, right? And Gauranga Prabhu would patiently answer him to the extent he could. Anyway, this was going on for a while. Then once it so happened that this person was an eye doctor, and there was this eye clinic in Barsana. So Gauranga Prabhu asked him to go, and he volunteered, and he went, and he spent whatever 2 weeks over there. And then when he came back, he went to Gauranga Prabhu, and Prabhu was like, okay, now there's more questions. He said that all my questions have been answered. So that's the power of Sangha. So we see the same transformation in the king, that he's asking, he's not fully convinced, but just the process of having the conversation with a Mahabhagavat, we already see this humility developing in him, this openness developing in him. And we see that it will completely transform. Okay. Moving on to verse 2. Jvaramayartasya yathagdam sat nidagdagdasya yatha himamba kudehamanahi vidastadrishte brahman vachaste mritam aushadam me.
O best of Brahmanas, my body is filled with dirty things, and my vision has been beaten by the serpent of pride. Due to my material conceptions, I am diseased. Your nectarian instructions are the proper medicine for one suffering from such a fever, and they are cooling water for one scorched by the heat.
So we see the mood of the king. So there's an example. It's more in the material perspective, that there was this maestro musician who he was like at the top of his game. I forget his name, but he was once teaching a student, and he was basically trying to teach him some part of the music. And then the student says that, that I don't think so. You have explained this part clearly to me. So he became very angry. He says, don't ever say that I did not explain to you clearly. You need to say is, I am not able to understand what you have explained. Now he's coming from the platform of false ego, that I'm always right and you're wrong. We see that the king over here is coming from the platform of true humility. So in the previous verse, he conveys that I don't fully understand what you're saying. But he's saying that's not because of you, it's because of me. And he gives 4 analogies to talk about his condition. He says that I am diseased. So when a person is diseased, his faculties are unlimited. So correct medicine can cure a person with fever. Right? So he's also glorifying Jat Bharat. Second, he says ice water relieves the person burned by the summer sun. And so he says, I'm burning because of because of this material desires, and your instructions are like ice water. So the patient does not need to understand how the medicine works. He just needs to follow the instructions of the doctor in taking the medicine. Similarly, how the cold water works on the body may not be clear. But the king is saying that I can testify to the fact that I'm experiencing relief. Right? And the third analogy that he says is your words are like nectar. And the fourth that he says is that your words are like medicine for one who is bitten by the serpent of pride. So we see that he is genuinely putting himself in a lower position. That I'm diseased, my body is burning, and he's coupling that with the glorification of Jat Bharat. That your words are like nectar, your words are like cold water, your words are medicine to a diseased person. Right? So we see that how the mood of surrender between the disciple is going to facilitate the guru from revealing more and more to the disciple. Okay, verse 3. Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayartam prakashyami paschadaduna subodham adhyatma yoga kratyam tavoktam akhyānikatula chete some.
Whatever doubts I have about the particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive and I want to understand this clearly.
So Prabhupada comments that this mood of surrender and inquisitiveness that Maharaj Rahugana is displaying towards Jat Bharat is the defining nature of a guru-disciple relationship. So there is no formal initiation that is happening. It's not that Jat Bharat asked the king to sit for a yagya and gave him and tied the tulsi around gave him a name and a mantra. Nothing like that happened. But the relationship between the guru and the disciple is perfectly exemplified over here. The king is humble, he is inquisitive, and he is ready to act upon the instructions of the guru. He is clearly showing himself, the Prabhupada would say the disciple should consider himself as a fool number one in front of the guru. So he's genuinely considering himself as incapable of understanding all the instruction, but that's not stopping him from asking, because that's how that ignorance will go away. The guru tells you something you don't understand, you think upon it, meditate, then you go back and ask something more, and the guru gives you something more. Sometimes instructions are in terms of tattva gyan, sometimes they're in terms of practice. The person says, I don't understand this, and the guru says, do this. Like in the case of Gauranga Darshan Prabhu, person kept asking all this abstract theoretical question, and he said that you go and to the Prasanna camp. And that when you follow through their instruction, then both Gyan and Vigyan appeared. Right? So the other aspects are also important. Right? Like having a fire yagya, giving a name, giving a mantra, giving the tulsi beads, they're also important because they create formality, right? They create samskar, favorable impressions. They work to strengthen the relationship. But without surrender, they're just formality. They need to be accompanied with the real mood of a guru-disciple relationship, which is exemplified in this verse. The Prabhupada, he says in the purport that Tasmat Guru Prapatye Jigyasa Shreya Uttamam. The intelligent man must be very inquisitive to know the transcendental science deeply, therefore he must approach a guru. Although Jat Bharat explained everything to the king, it appears that his intelligence was not perfect enough to understand clearly. He therefore requested further explanation. Tadvidipani Patena Pariprashnena Sevaya. So, Prabhupada comments on Paripatena, which is surrender, and Pariprashnena, which is inquiry, and Sevaya. Sevaya means then to serve. On the other hand, a challenging self-spirit before the spiritual master should be avoided if one is at all interested in learning the Vedic instructions in depth. Okay, verse 4. Yadaha yogeshvara drishyamanam kriya phalam sat vyavaharamūlam nahe yagyasa tattvam vamaršanāya bhavanamushmin brahmate manome.
O Master of yogic power, you say that fatigue resulting from moving the body here and there is appreciated by direct perception. But actually, there is no fatigue. It simply exists as a matter of formality. By such inquiries and answer, no one can come to the conclusion of absolute truth. Because of your presentation, this statement, my mind is a little disturbed.
So honesty is very important. So when the guru says something to the disciple should accept it after properly being convinced about it. So we see that this is the second time that Maharaj Rahugana is asking clarification on the same question. So back in the 10th chapter, he had first chastised Jat Bharat, saying that you appear fatigued by carrying this palanquin. Right? So Jat Bharat then responded to that from a philosophical perspective, that this load is carried by the body and the resulting fatigue does not belong to me because I am the spirit soul. Then we see that the king, he accepts Jat Bharat as a guru, but then he once again says that he's not convinced about the answer. Right? He says that you're saying that the fatigue belongs to the body and not the soul, and then he gives that analogy that if there is milk and rice and a pot, and the pot is heated, then the milk is heated and the rice gets cooked. So similarly, he says that the soul gets fatigued because it is in contact with the subtle body is in contact with the gross body. Now, this also indicates that the king still had traces of ego, because the nature of the king is that they are used to dominating, whether it is in words, in arguments, whether it's in the battlefield. So if we see that the king, he's fixated on the empirical aspect of spirituality. Prabhupada criticizes this, right? So empirical aspect meaning that what he can either observe or deduce, right? So empirical aspect can be used as a starting point, but it can never be used to explain spirituality with complete clarity. So that's the mistake that the king is doing, that he's proud of the knowledge that he has. He's proud of his intelligence. He's proud of his observation, that he's making these far out logical connections, giving these analogies, etc. So Prabhupada criticizes this, saying that all these questions about bodily conception do not constitute knowledge of the absolute truth. Knowledge of the absolute truth is quite different from the understanding of bodily pains and pleasures. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna informs Arjuna that the pains and pleasures experienced in relation with the body are temporary. So Prabhupada is criticizing the fixation on the material aspect, that my body is getting tired and I am experiencing tired, whereas real inquiry should be about the soul. And we of course see that Jat Bharat is an expert preacher. He takes this inquiry and connects it to the spiritual platform. Yeah, so verses 5 and 6. Brahman vacha ayam janonam chalan prithvyam yah parthivaha parthiva tasyapi changryoradigulpajanga Janurumadhyora Shirodharam Shaha Amshedidarvi Sebikachavashyam Savir Rajitya Padeshaste Yasmin Bhavan Rudanijabhimano Rajasmi Sindhus Iti Durmadandaha.
The self-realized Brahmana, Jat Bharat said, among the various material combinations and permutations, there are various form and earthly transformation. For some reason, these move on the surface of earth and are called palanquin carrier. Those material transformation which do not move are gross material object like stone. In any case, the material body is made of earth and stone in the form of feet, ankle, calf, knees, thigh, torso, throat, and head. Upon the shoulder is a wooden palanquin, and within the palanquin is a so-called king of River. The body of the king is simply another transformation of earth, but within that body, your lordship is situated, and falsely thinking that you are the king of the state of River.
So in 6 verses, so these 6 verses are very technical, very, very long purports. And Jat Bharat, he uses this question put forth by the king to establish the whole tattva of spirituality. Right? So the king's concern is that the bodily pain and pleasures are felt by the soul. So Jat Bharat, he begins to first speak about the material manifestation, because that's what the king is observing, right? So he in these 2 verses, so first I'll summarize what he says, and then we will go through it systematically. So the summary is that Jat Bharat is making the point that whatever we see in this material world is nothing but a transformation of earth. So the king, under illusion, is considering himself as the ruler, and Jat Bharat, he addresses the king as Parthiva. Parthiva means one with a earthly body. So he's saying you are considering yourself as a king, but you're also a transformation of the earth, the same that the palanquin is and I am. Okay, so this is the summary. Let's go through it systematically. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he breaks it into points and we'll go over it. So Jat Bharat is saying that the king is being carried on the palanquin by the palanquin carriers who are walking on earth. So the earth is made of earth. Above the earth is the feet, the calves, the knees, the thighs, the torso, the throat, the head of the carriers, essentially the body of the carriers, which is also a transformation of earth. Now, above them is the palanquin, which is also a transformation of earth. Wood, and wood is a transformation of earth, so it is a transformation of earth. In the palanquin is sitting another transformation of the earth, who is falsely considering himself to be a king. Right. So he has now established that everything from the earth, that is empirically earth, to the king, they are simply the same transformations of the earth. Now, since he is moving, the palanquin is moving, one may say that he is animate. And if for some reason he does not move, then considered as inanimate like a stone. So that is the difference, that the earth is inanimate because it does not move, but the palanquin bearers, the palanquin and the king are animate because they move. But regardless of whether they are animate or inanimate, they are still all transformations of earth. So he's also addressing implicit objections that the king might say. That yes, you talk about the earth, but the earth is lying there, but I'm moving. So there's a difference. So he's saying, no, there's no difference. If one part is moving, one part is not moving, one part is animate, the other part is inanimate, but that does not in any way go against the basic point I'm making, which is that everything, that the piece of earth, the bearers, the palanquin, the king, they're all transformations of earth. Okay, so now this is one point that he has made. Now he builds upon this point. And so he says that the earth is not tired. The palanquin is not tired. Now, they are both transformations of earth. The palanquin bearers are also transformations of earth. So, how can we say the two transformations of earth are not tired and one transformation of earth is tired? So, one might say that the king might say is that the fatigue arises from the possessor of the limb. So it's not that the limb that is tired, but the fatigue arises from the possessor of the limb who is carrying the palanquin. So Jat Bharat contradicts it. He says that one cannot distinguish fatigue in this way. It appears to be in the limbs which are made of earth, which does not experience fatigue. Right? So, whether a possessor of the limb exists or not, one experiences the fatigue of carrying a palanquin. Right? So, Jat Bharat, he keeps making this point that everything from the earth to the king are transformations of earth. Now, how can you say that some transformations are feeling fatigue and some are not? The palanquin is not feeling fatigue. The king is not feeling fatigue. The earth is not feeling fatigue. But the bearers of the palanquin are feeling fatigue. Now, king might say that even though their body is made of earth, but the fatigue does not belong to the body, but to the possessor of the body. So now this is an important point that comes up that will get developed later on. So Vishwanath Chakravarti explains with an analogy. He says that if a child is wearing heavy ornaments, the child will not become fatigued because he's happily carrying the ornament. Right? If a if a woman is carrying a child, then the child may be heavy, but the woman will never experience fatigue because she's happily carrying the child. But take another example, that you go to a porter and ask the person to carry luggage, and the porter will immediately start complaining, this is too heavy and it will cost a lot of money. So what is the difference between the two situations? In one case, the child is happily carrying a lot of weight, even though he has a weak body. But a porter who has strong and stout body, he is feeling fatigue at carrying even less weight. So what this means is that what is actually determining fatigue or not fatigue is not the load, but the attachment to the load. Because the child is attached to the jewel, because the mother is attached to the child, they never feel any fatigue. Because the porter is not attached to the load he is asked to carry, they feel a lot more fatigue. So what is the next conclusion from this? That happiness and distress are only experienced by one's sense of self-identity. When the possessor of the body identifies with the body, then he experiences fatigue, which factually is neither there in the body or in the possessor of the body. So there is no fatigue in the body because the body is made of earth. There is no fatigue in the possessor of the body because it is non-material. The fatigue is in the attachment between the possessor of the body and the body. Right, so here we can now see how Jat Bharat is taking it to the level of understanding the tattva between how does the spirit soul become ensnared in material conception. The spirit soul never becomes matter. Matter does not become spirit. But because of the spirit soul's attachment to matter, it acquires the characteristics of matter. It displays behavior that is neither entirely of the spirit soul nor entirely of matter. Because matter does not feel fatigue. The soul does not feel fatigue. But because of this attachment, it acquires a different conception. That is not really a symptom of matter or spirit, but a symptom of the relationship between the matter and the spirit. Right? So, in order to drive this point home, Jat Bharat, he seems to be insulting the king, but he's making this philosophical point. He says that in the palanquin, there is another transformation of matters, thinking that I am the king, but actually you know nothing. Right? So he says that is your happiness. Your happiness is that you think you know, but you actually know nothing. So those who do not have this false identity do not experience happiness or distress. Okay, so Prabhupada writes in the purport, he summarizes this logic. He says, after analyzing the material body of the palanquin carrier and the palanquin passenger, Jat Bharat concludes that the real living force is the living entity. The living entity is the offspring and offshoot of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, within this material world, among moving and non-moving, the real principle is Lord Vishnu. So what we see Prabhupada doing over here, and you'll see that he does that in the subsequent verses, is that Prabhupada's purport, they go all the way to the final conclusion that Jat Bharat makes. So Prabhupada is making this point that everything rests on the Lord. The real principle is Lord Vishnu. Jat Bharat hasn't spoken about it so far. He's kind of building upon it. He's talking about matter and spirit, the relationship between matter and spirit. And then interestingly, he will go to the Lord not from spirit, but from matter. That's the interesting path that he takes. But ultimately, he reaches the point that Prabhupada is speaking right away, that both matter and spirit rest on the Lord. And so he says that living entity, Prabhupada says, the living entity has nothing to do with bodily pain and pleasure. These are simply mental concoctions. An intelligent mind will find the original cause of everything. Material combination and permutation may be a matter of fact in worldly dealings, but actually the living soul, the living force, the soul has nothing to do with it. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if there's any comments before we go on to the next set of verses.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Regarding the last thing that you made about fatigue and why somebody feels fatigue, somebody does not feel fatigue, or it's a matter of attachment to the body, or once if one is not on the bodily platform, then he will not feel the distress of the fatigue, or so. But then we also feel the pain. It's not that we don't feel the pain, right? Even if a person who is self-realized, does it mean he does not feel the pain of the body, or he still feels the pain, but he does not suffer the pain? That is my understanding. So fatigue is a feeling, or is a symptom, is a physical symptom. How how to understand that? It's kind of a I don't know that I'm making myself clear. If there is a body pain, that is different from suffering. Suffering and pain are two different things. Whereas fatigue is something which is you consider as a part of the pain or part of the suffering. I don't know how, that is something which is difficult to understand.
So the question that you're asking will be answered, but let me answer it based on the present two verses. That pain or suffering or fatigue, they are symptoms of the attachment of the soul to the material conception. And your point goes a little bit on the specifics, that let's assume a self-realized person is walking on a road and then he steps on a nail and the nail pierces his foot. Does he not feel pain? Right? He feels pain. Does he become bewildered by that pain? Right? So let's assume I'm walking, I step on the nail, and then not only do I feel the pain, I also get bewildered by it. Right? I curse the person who's put the nail over there, and and so many things go. Why me? Why so many people are walking? Could be one of them. Right? So that's the pain comes and goes, but that stays. So that's the difference between a liberated person and if you look at the definition of bhakti, Anavilashita Shunyam, so it basically talks about being free from material motivations, not being free from completely, because all these aspects are real. The pain, the suffering, the heat and cold is real. It does not mean that when one becomes a devotee, one becomes like Superman, that does not feel heat, does not feel cold. All that is there, but they don't get bewildered by it. And that's what, at least in this set of verses, we'll develop more. In this set of verses, the point that Jat Bharat is saying, that the king was getting agitated because of that, because of the way the palanquin was getting jostled. So that agitation is a symptom of the attachment of the spirit to the material conception. Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. There is not a proverb, but there's a saying say that if somebody is in love and the lover said, okay, I do this for me, if you have to go to the moon and come back, you will do it. Because the relationship of love is there, then fatigue is not there.
Right.
Because of the love, the fatigue is like erased. You don't see it disappear. The relationship.
Yeah, we see it empirically that generally it's considered the women are the weaker sex. But you look at a mother, they will wake up all night to take care of the child, and then morning they will again be up and running, trying to take care of the household chores. Really speaking, the men become the weaker sex. The women, but the difference is not that they don't experience tiredness or pain or fatigue, but how it affects them is completely different in that case. So that's the point that Jai Bharat is trying to make from both senses, both ways. It's not that he's glorifying one who takes pleasure in doing this, but the point he's making is that this fatigue does not belong to the body, because he made that example. The earth is earth, the palanquin is earth. They're also experiencing the same tribulations. They're not complaining. So it does not belong to matter, does not belong to soul. But it is still there, which means that it belongs to the material conception of the soul. And like I said, we'll develop on this more so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to verse 7. Sochanivam stvamadhikstadina vishtya nigranam niranugrasi janasya goptasmi vikattamano nasho vase vruddha sabha sudrishta.
It is a fact, however, that these innocent people carrying your palanquin without payment are certainly suffering due to this injustice. Their condition is very lamentable because you have forcibly engaged them in carrying your palanquin. This proves that you are cruel and unkind, yet due to false prestige, you were thinking that you were protecting the citizen. This is ludicrous. You were such a fool that you could not have been adorned as a great man in an assembly of persons advanced in knowledge.
So Jai Bharat is an expert spiritual master, right? We see that how he is chastising the king very, very directly. He says that such a fool that you could not have been adored as a great man in an assembly of persons advanced in knowledge. Right? So the king thinks that is adored by a big group of people, but Jai Bharat is saying they're like you, they're all fools. But if you were in an assembly of advanced people, nobody would like you. Now, he's not saying to put it down, he's continuing to build humility in the king. If he wanted to put him down, he would have just walked away from him. But the chastisement of the guru, it carries a lot of jewels in it. It develops humility in the disciple. It forces the disciple to re-examine, to recommit. So when a guru is being really merciful on the disciple, then they express it by chastisement. When they are a little bit merciful, they will express it by praise. And when they're completely not connected with the disciple, they will express it by indifference. Right? So the worst thing that can happen between a guru and a disciple, where the guru simply doesn't care for the disciple, that whatever you do is fine. They don't really care. I mean, that basically means the relationship is not functional. there. So we see this loving chastisement from the guru to the disciple. Now, along with this, Jat Bharat is also defeating the points that were made by Rahugana, right? So Rahugana was indicating that the fatigue of the body is experienced by the soul. So Jat Bharat picks on this point and says that if you really think that the fatigue is being experienced by the soul, then it makes your actions worthy of condemnation, because you're forcing these people to carry your palanquin, and knowing that you're causing distress to the soul. So at one point, you're saying you're a protector of dharma. The quality of dharma is righteousness and mercy. So you're not displaying either of them. You're not displaying righteousness because you engage these palanquin bearers without any payment. And you're not displaying any mercy because, as per your own words, the tiredness is felt by the soul, so you're inflicting pain on the soul. At the same time, you are saying that I am the protector of dharma. I am the servant of Achyuta. So if you were indeed a servant of Krishna, you would be kind to the soul. If you were indeed a protector of dharma, you would not engage them without money. This is why Jat Bharat says that you are ignorant and drishta. Drishta means proud. Okay. So we see that Jat Bharat is smashing the king, very similar to where we see how Krishna, he defeats Arjun's argument, he dismantles them, but does not leave them there. Then he, after dismantling them, then he gives them knowledge. Right? We see that in the second chapter, Krishna tells Arjun that why do you think we'll kill the people? Because the soul is immortal. You can't kill the soul. And then he says, but if you think that the body has no soul and it is a bag of chemicals, then there is no harm, because it is just matter. There is no harm in destroying matter. So Krishna is defeating Arjun's arguments either way. Jat Bharat is defeating the king's arguments both ways. Right? He's saying that the gross body is made of earth and cannot experience fatigue. So the point that you're making is not true. But if you think that the soul experiences fatigue, then you're fool number one, that you are causing distress to the soul, and you're adharmic because you're not paying them. So Srila Prabhupada, he compares the ignorance of the king to the fallen condition of the present day rulers. Right? So it is stated that in the Srimad Bhagavatam that in Kali Yuga the heads of government will be plunderers and thieves, and the situation will become worse. And then Krishna will come as Kalki and set it right. So now Maharaj Rahugana, he has been chastised a little heavily because of the mercy of Jat Bharat, and he rectifies himself also. But Prabhupada says the present day king, there is no rectification. They're simply thieves and plunderers. They don't listen to logic, so ultimately Krishna has to come and cut their head off. Okay, moving on to verse 8. Yadakshita evacharacharasya vidamanistham prabhavam chanityam tannamatonya vyavaharamulam nirupyatam satpriyayanumeyam.
All of us on the surface of the globe are living entities in different forms. Some of us are moving and some of us non-moving. All of us come in existence, remain for some time, and are annihilated when the body is again mingled with the earth. We are all simply different transformations of the earth. different bodies and capacities are simply formation of the earth that exists in name only. For everything grows out of earth, and when everything is annihilated, it again mingles with the earth. In other words, we are but dust and shall but be dust. Everyone can consider this point.
So now Jat Bharat is building on the point that he made. So he previously established that other than the soul, everything else is a transformation of earth. Now, earth he uses it a little bit. Earth means earth, water, fire, air, ether. Right? He's calling it earth. Over here, earth is soil. That essentially everything is coming from the earth. But it refers to the material elements. So he says that other than soul, everything is earth. Now he's expanding on that point to a more universal perspective. Right. So the king may object. Right. So the king may say that your statement that the practical world is insubstantiable is not true, since we see that liberated souls without false identity also experience happiness and distress. Therefore, one cannot deny that one experiences fatigue from carrying the load. Right. So this is a point that was made by Nanda Prabhu, that even if you accept the fact that this fatigue or pain is a symptom of the conditioning of the soul, then the corollary to that is that when the soul is not conditioned, it should not experience anything like pain or fatigue, etc. But that's not true. He says that the liberated souls without false identity also experience happiness and distress from prarabdha karma. They also die. They also fall sick. They also experience pain. So Jat Bharat first identifies that, and then we'll expand on the logic. So he says that true, that even liberated souls like me experience traces of happiness and distress even after the destruction of illusion. And then he gives an analogy that when a person gets up from a traumatic dream, he may still experience traces of trauma, even after he realizes that it was a dream. Like sometimes people have a traumatic dream and they're sweating, and maybe it's a scary dream. So they get up and they realize that it was a dream. But they're still sweating, their heart is still beating. Why? Because they're still not completely transitioned from the dreamlike state to the waking state. So in a dream, a person may consider the snake to be real. When the person wakes up, he understands that there was no snake, but he still carries the fear with him for a few moments. So that is the conventional reality that is experienced by liberated souls. So what is the logic? Let's go through the points in the logic. The material world is illusory. First point. Second point, liberated souls are not subject to this illusion. Third point, therefore they should not experience any impact of the material world. Fourth point, but liberated persons do demonstrate impact from the material world. So one conclusion from this is that our premise is incorrect. That the premise is that the material world is illusory, and because the liberated persons are not subject to illusion, they should not be impacted by the material world. But because they are being impacted, it means that the material world is not illusory. Right. So this is the implicit point that Jat Bharat might say, and that the king might say. And to counter this point, the point made by Jat Bharat is that the process of disengagement of even a liberated soul from illusion is gradual. So, and Bharat Maharaj is a classic example of it. That he was a Mahabhagavat. He was at the stage of Bhava. But even then he was subject to illusion. So this process is gradual. So the activities of the material conditioned souls are a product of material nature. So everything arises and disappears into earth or material nature. Right. So therefore, the cause of the conventional world should be discerned as the transformation of earth only. So the difference between the material and the spiritual, materially the conditioned and the materially liberated soul is that for a material conditioned soul, everything is a product of material nature. They themselves are a product of material nature. Their activities are, their suffering is, their happiness is, everything is a product of material nature. The materially liberated person understands the distinction of what is matter and what is spirit. But because they are still developing that distinction, they would display the effects of the material world. But the effect is displayed in a different way. So it is displayed more externally and less internally. Right? So this is a point that Bharat makes to counter the point that if liberation is the cause of material disengagement, then why do liberated persons still demonstrate material impact? Why do they fall sick? Why do they die? Why do they get angry? Why do they sometimes go after wealth and fame? Because the disengagement is a process. Srila Prabhupada writes a very elaborate purport on this, in which he quotes several verses. And again, Srila Prabhupada is continuing to re-establish the conclusion of Jat Bharat. Right? The conclusion being that the Lord is the cause of everything. So he quotes the Brahma Sutra, Tad Anvayantam Arambhuna, that the cosmic manifestation is a mixture of matter and spirit, but the cause is the supreme Brahman. He quotes Srimad Bhagavatam, Idame Vishwam Bhagavan Nivetraha. The entire cosmic manifestation is a transformation of the energy of the Lord. And Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7.4 says, Mi binna prakriti rastada, that the material world is a separated energy. That parasya shakti vidvar shruyate. That the material world is a transformation of his different energy. Then he quotes Chandogya Upanishad, and he quotes the Mundaka Upanishad. So all the quotes essentially are pointing to the fact that the material world rests on the Supreme Lord. Right? And Prabhupada, there is a summary of the phenomenal. This is the summary of the phenomenal and nominal philosophy. So phenomenal is the material world and nominal is the spiritual world. The phenomenal world depends on the nominal existence. Matter depends on spirit. And ultimately everything depends on Krishna. Okay, moving on to verse 9. Evam niruktam kshiti shabdavritam asanidhana pramanavoye avidyaya manasa kaliptaste yesham samuhena krito visheshaha.
One may say the varieties arise from the planet Earth itself. However, although the universe may temporarily appear to be the truth. It ultimately has no real existence. The Earth was originally created by a combination of atomic particles, but these particles are impermanent. Actually, the atom is not the cause of the universe, although some philosophers think so. It is not a fact that the varieties found in the material world simply result from atomic juxtaposition or combination.
So, having established the fact that the material world is nothing but a transformation of Earth, Jat Bharat is now taking it to one step further, saying that actually the material world is not even Earth, because the Earth is made of atoms. So the point is making is the material world is essentially a combination of atoms. Now the king might say that even if I were to accept that everything is a transformation of Earth, it still proves that the material world is real because the Earth is real. So now Jat Bharat is going to prove that this material world is illusory. So in order to do that, he first says that you're saying that this material world is composed of Earth. Now he's not saying it, Jat Bharat said it, but the king agrees to it, that yes, the palanquin is made of Earth, the body of the carriers is made of Earth, but the Earth is not a primary element in itself. The Earth itself is the result of atomic juxtaposition or combination. And this is Sankhya. That essentially by the combination of various atoms, Earth comes. And Prabhupada, once again in the purport, he says that even these atoms are created by the Supreme Lord. One of the reasons, and I'm speculating a little bit here, that Srila Prabhupada is very, very insistent in each of this purport to draw back the fact that everything is based upon Krishna. Now, Jat Bharat himself draws it back towards the end of the chapter, but Prabhupada, he draws it back right from the beginning. For the same reason that in the Bhagavad Gita, right from the second chapter, whether Krishna is speaking about Sankhya Yoga, Karma, Jnana, Stan, purports of Prabhupada, they're always talking about Bhakti. Okay? Because Prabhupada's purport are there to inspire Bhakti in our heart. And he also wants to protect against somebody taking a verse in isolation and quoting it out of context. So that's why he gives this protection. Otherwise, people could, and my guess is, that's where I said I may be speculating, that these verses are probably quoted by the impersonalists. That in the Bhagavatam it is said that the earth is essentially a combination of atoms. And in the Bhagavatam it is said that everything that you see is matter and spirit. So in order to make sure that people don't take those verses in isolation and be confused, Srila Prabhupada, he gives us this safety net, saying that yes, the material world is made of atoms, but the atoms come from Krishna. Yes, everything we see is a combination of matter and spirit, but both matter and spirit come from Krishna. So Prabhupada quotes 4 verses. He quotes Janmadhyasya, the first verse, the Krishna is the cause of all causes. Then he quotes Bhagavad Gita 10:8, Aham Sarvasya Prabhu. And then Brahma Samhita 5:1, that Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sarvakaran Karanam. And then he quotes 7:4, Bhumi Rapina Lovayu. So all these verses go back to making the point that Krishna is the source of everything. Okay, so we'll do 2 more. Okay. So the next set of verses actually go together. And Prem Kishore Prabhu tells me that this Wednesday class will not be held because he has a conflict. And after that, I go on my trip, which means that we'll have the next class almost a month away from now. So I don't want to start the next set of 3 verses. They have very elaborate purports. And I will definitely not be able to do all 3 of them in the remaining 10-12 minutes, especially the verse 11. Verse 11, actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti, who generally is famous for writing very short purports, he writes a purport that is several pages. Now, Prabhupada's purport is relatively short and kind of analyzing it from a tattva basis. So I'm going to stop over here and see if there is any questions, comments, or any general discussion that we have, and then we'll resume from verse 10 in about a month's time.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Just a clarification. This is from the first verse, where Jat Bharat is very conscious of not doing good, because it may result into the false prestige, which he may get addicted to, right? In our daily life, we do tend to do that. Like, basically, it is unknowingly in a subtle level. Everyone needs the validation, right? If you're cooking good, oh, how is it? Or even when we bring up our own kids, oh, did we do the right thing? Or while preaching or taking classes, oh, was it good? So these kind of validations do, in a subtle level, we expect that. And if anything goes wrong, again, it will be an impact to our unconscious. So what is the learning point here? That's the question. The learning point is leave it to Krishna. That's what we are trained to. But leaving it to Krishna and also doing for Krishna. That is the main thing. But here, Jat Bharat is explaining that you should not even do good. That's where, what is the learning point? I couldn't.
So Jat Bharat was a case of once bitten, twice shy. Right. So he tried to do good, and because of that, he lost his spiritual focus.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Prabhupada made this point that 2 points actually. That one is that this kind of caution is demonstrated when devotees reach a very, very advanced stage. So we know in Vaishnava there is something called Nirjan Bhajan. Now it's not that much there, but earlier, like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod, towards the end of their life, they took Babaji Vesh, Nirjan Bhajan, they did all alone, just Harinam Sankirtan, just Jap. And this was when they were at the most exalted maturity of the spiritual realization. And they're powerful preachers. Essentially, they live to preach. But they isolated themselves because they did not want this as a possible contamination. That they get too much of glorification, they get attached to it, they get too much of worship, they get attached to it. So better not take that risk. This does not apply to us because we are not at that stage. Right? We are still progressing. And then the 2 points that you made were very, very relevant. That we are trained that any success that we have, we offer it to our spiritual master, ultimately to Krishna. You did a very good class, all glories to Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj. You cooked very good meal, somebody taught me how to cook. That person was a great teacher. We may not be able to do it all the time, but that's the training. You use the very right word, that we are trained. The reason we are trained is we don't get attached. Right? Sometimes somebody comes and says, you give a really terrible class. We don't say all glories to Prabhupada, right? We don't say this because that's what Prabhupada said. Then we say, okay, Prabhu, instruct me. What is it that I can do to improve? So in neither cases, there is the contamination, neither out of praise nor out of criticism. If you look at it from Prabhupada's perspective, he was in a very precarious position. Right? There were people who were willing to accept him as God. Now can you imagine? There are people who are willing to come and accept you as God. He would be sitting on the Vyasthan in the Bombay in the Jew temple. Some of the disciples, they came to Prabhupada and they said, we want to start Guru Puja. And Prabhupada said no, because he was concerned that him sitting on the Vyasthan, offering Achman, Arti, etc., how it might affect. But then the disciples insisted, no, Prabhupada, we want to do Guru Puja. And Prabhupada agreed. But this I heard from at least 2 disciples of Prabhupada who were close enough when Prabhupada was being glorified. In one case, the disciples were glorifying Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was continuously saying, you be it, you be it. In another case, when the disciples were glorifying Prabhupada under his breath, he kept saying, glories to Bhakti Siddhanta, glories to Bhakti Siddhanta. Right? So he was either reflecting it or transferring it. So our focus is to do good, but we are trained that whatever good we do, we try not to have that contaminate us, and we know the way to do it. Doesn't mean that we are better than Jat Bharat. The Jat Bharat did not know this, and we know it, but we are at a stage where we draw sustenance from that. Like Jat Bharat did not need that for sustenance. In a way, he did that. That's why he felt, because he was isolated. But we are at a stage that we need sustenance from it. Like we need sustenance from serving devotees. We need sustenance from the Dadi Pratiganati, Gujamakiti Prashati. That's how we will survive in our spiritual life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. And very good answer also. Any other thoughts?
So, I was thinking about one time there was a devotee, thinking that he is the center of everything. And then Prabhupada started to say that in this universe, we have so many planets, and this planet Earth, and then, Prabhupada just pinning that you are here in New York, whatever. And the same way Jat Bharat is telling about the palanquin and this and this and this.
That's the mood of the Guru, that he first smashes the ego of the disciple, and then when the barriers are down, then gives spiritual knowledge. So that's what Prabhupada was doing with the disciples. That's what we see Jat Bharat also doing. Thank you for that example.
Prabhu, we also say that illusion, the Mayavadi says illusion is false, but we say illusion is an energy of Krishna also. So that way, although we call it as illusion, we understand it is not false, or it is still energy. There is an energy of Krishna is there. So I was thinking, when you're talking about the atoms and how they make up the elements and things like that. So I've had some question and I'm forgetting now. Anyway, it'll come to me when I remember. I'll get back to you, Prabhu. I don't want to waste other people's time.
Okay, but just to comment on that a little bit, the illusion is in identifying with matter. That is not Krishna's energy. Krishna's energy is the soul, Krishna's energy is matter, but the soul identifying with matter is the soul's free will. Now, it is facilitated by Maya Devi, which is Krishna's energy. We generally say that Maya Devi illusions the soul, but we had this discussion. Maya Devi does not illusion a soul. The soul allows Maya Devi to illusion it. It's like you're in an amusement park and there are different stalls there. It's up to you. You can go to one stall and play one game, another stall play another game. So there are some jivas who play that let me be illusioned by Maya Devi game, right? And that facility is there, provided by Krishna. So yes, Krishna's energy is it's not imaginary. Krishna's illusory energy is real. But the illusion of the jiva, that is not by the desire of Krishna. That is only by the desire of the jiva. Right? So that distinction needs to be made. Okay. So if there are no other thoughts or questions or comments, please
So I have one thing, Prabhu. So from this coming Wednesday, I will not have the classes until this July. Which date, Prabhu? I forgot.
So I'm back on the 14th of July, but
Okay.
not sure.
Yeah, we'll figure out after you come.
Yeah.
So I will share this. I have this Swadhyay. First focus is on this Swadhyay starting next week. And if anyone wants to have the presentations as per the schedule, we can, again, I will share that worksheet. So we will have the periodic calls starting probably next week. Okay. Anyone has any questions or recommendations, Prabhu?
Kushabha, you will send the link, right, by WhatsApp or?
Yeah, via WhatsApp, the same spreadsheet which I've published. I will update with the Swadhyay questions and also the presentation topics.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Anant Kuri Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.